Hey folks, Ike Eastman here, host of the Eastmans Journal Podcast. And as you know, we're always talking to very interesting individuals. Today is no different. Today we sit down with Ryan McMillan. Now that last name might ring a bell in the rifle stock world. And this is the grandson of the McMillan rifle stocks. He talks about his grandfather, talks about that business, talks about all the things with rifle stocks. However, some things that you don't know is Ryan is a former Navy SEAL and he's got his own stock company. But there's a treat. Wait till you hear what he went to college for. And we dive into some of the neatest things about the physical world around us as he talks about physics. He's got a degree in physics and understands it extremely well. Plus, as always, I ask him the 3 questions. You will not believe his third answer. So let's sit down with Ryan and have a genuine conversation. Battlefield to backcountry. In these times of uncertainty, it is important to find communities that share your value and interest. Cryptic has built a reputation for excellence in outdoor gear, providing effective camouflage patterns for all kinds of activities, everything from hunting to tactical operations. Their commitment to quality and epic design is evident in their range of apparel and gear, making Cryptic the perfect choice for any outdoor adventure. Don't miss out on gearing up for the upcoming hunting season with Cryptic today. So, you grew up in Phoenix. I mean, what did you do as a kid? Did you hunt? Did you fish? Did you play baseball?
Yeah, I mostly played sports. Growing up in Phoenix. Well, so my grandfather, he started McMillan fiberglass stocks, and he started a bunch of other companies in the rifle industry. So we did a lot of shooting, but we didn't really go hunting with him. He was more of a competition shooter. So
really,
as a matter of fact, the more I think about it, I don't know if I ever have seen any pictures of him hunting or anything. He was into competition stuff. So we would go out and plank around and stuff with him. But growing up, I was just like a normal kid, sports, and I guess a normal city kid, playing sports. I played baseball growing up. I got into basketball actually in my later years and in high school. And so, yeah, that was my main thing. And then, had an opportunity to go to college. I was a pretty good basketball player. But I don't really know. It's hard. I think back on that time a little bit, and I don't really know exactly why I didn't pursue it. But I guess maybe God has a plan, right? Because I ended up going into the military, and that was really the best thing I could have done at the time. So,
how did you? I asked this to a lot of guys, like Terry. I was like, how did you decide to go to the military? Because I remember being 18, and I didn't even know what I was going to eat for breakfast, let alone make a decision to go to the military. Like, this is the biggest thing you're ever going to do.
Well, it's weird because most of the guys that I talked to who are team guys, they had known since they were kids, right? Mm-hmm. They were 8 years old. They had posters of Navy SEALs or whatever, G.I. Joes. And it was like, I just had this, I turned 18, 19, and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I just started having this urge to do something, I don't know, aggressive, masculine, something to prove myself, I think, more than anything, right? And I didn't know what that was. So I kind of started searching around, and the military came about. Initially, it was like maybe I'll be a pilot. I don't know. I was just searching around, and then my grandfather had some ties to the Special Forces because he built guns for them, right? Especially SEAL Team 6, and we had those guys around the house a lot. And even though I don't really remember it, I was pretty young. That whole aura permeated through our family forever, So there was always talk about SEALs, and there's always those guys were around, and my grandpa's building guns for him.
Right.
So when it kind of came down to figuring out what I was going to do, at some point I knew I was going to go in the military, but when it came down to it, I was like, maybe SEALs is what I want to do. So I remember my first thought was, I don't want to be a SEAL. It was my first thought when I was thinking about the military. But then as I was looking at all my options, it came SEALs is what it came down to. I'm like, dang, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. So I went, and it's hard to remember, but within weeks, I would say I was at the recruiters, and then in 3 months I was in boot camp.
You're kidding. So you went into the Navy knowing you were going to go into SEALs.
Yeah.
Versus going to the Navy and them saying you should go to SEALs.
Right. Huh. Yeah. I mean, there's a program back then. It was 2000, and there was a program called SEAL Challenge. So the SEAL Challenge was basically the Navy wanted to get people into the SEAL teams, but they also wanted to fill certain rates that were hard to fill. So a rate is a job.
Right.
So there are 8 rates that were basically the crappiest rates the Navy had. They couldn't fill them. So to entice people to fill these rates, they would say, hey, we'll you go to boot camp, you go to what's called A school, and then we'll send you straight to BUDS. But if you don't make it, if you fail out, you're going to get one of these 8 rates that we have a hard time filling. So, most people don't even make it to BUDS, by the way. They do this contract, they don't even make it to BUDS. And then there's all the people that don't make it to BUDS. Probably 99 out of 100 people who sign up for that contract end up going to the fleet and serving a role in the fleet because they need to fill those billets. So anyway, that's kind of how I did.
If you don't make it, BUDS, you're going to get one of these crappy jobs no one wants.
100%. And they would put that over our head in BUDS too. Like we'd be running on the beach and it would be a hard conditioning run and people would be, what's called Goon Squad. And they'd say, hey, look out, on the horizon, there's a bunch of ships out there. You guys want to be out there? You guys want to be here? You quit, that's where you're going to be. And so it was nonstop, just, hey, if you guys quit, you're going to a ship and you're going to be somewhere in Okinawa or, South America, on a ship. It's going to suck. Or do you want to be a SEAL? If you want to be a SEAL, suck it up and get through it. Yeah.
So that was because Terry Holland, which is another podcast I've done with a team guy, is he later in his career, he was doing a training where they would actually vet the guys before they even got into the system.
Yeah.
And, make sure you had the skills. So this was before that, obviously.
Yeah. So I listened to that podcast, and the way I feel like he got in was a similar way. I think the name of the program he got in with was different than the name of mine. Mine was called the SEAL Challenge. His was called something different, but it was the same concept. It was boot camp, A school, and then BUDS. Nowadays it's different. And I've trained a couple people to go into this program. I know a little bit about it, but basically you go and you sign up for to be a SEAL. And then you're in a holding program. You basically go to a location local to you that all these, I think SEAL SWIC, maybe it's EOD, I can't remember, but at least SEALs, they're all training to compete for slots.
Okay.
And so you're awarded a slot based upon your performance in these practices that you get. You have to go there. I don't know how many days a week, but a couple days a week, and basically go through this training with these SEAL team guys who are now stationed at these individual spots around the country, basically recruit. It's not necessarily recruiting because you still have to go and sign up. But once you sign up, you're in this
vetting
division. Yeah, you're in this kind of division, and they're looking at you, and they're looking at the best candidates, and they're only getting the best candidates into the Navy. So I mean, you may sit there. I don't know the details, but you could probably sit there for probably years if you're not a great performer. If new people keep coming on board and they're performing, they're going to get it. They're going to get the nod, and they'll go through the processes.
Oh my gosh, you could be
stuck
in purgatory for years.
Well, it's a big fear of the guys, and that's probably one of the things that motivates them to perform well. Even technically, you're not even technically in the military at that time. I don't know how they do the contractual paperwork, but you're not even in the military when you're in this program. But yeah, that's what's got to motivate them is like, hey, I could be sitting here in limbo for a year. I better really get off my butt and work hard.
So you're not even in the military. So you said you go there a couple times a week. The rest of the time you're just a civilian working at Home Depot or something?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then it's only once they select you that then you sign your contract, and then you go to boot camp, and you are in the Navy at that point.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So went to the Navy, went through BUDS, which, I mean, there's enough podcasts out there how sucky that must have been.
Yeah.
What after you got into the teams, what were you stationed at? What are some of the things you did there?
Yeah. So I was at SEAL Team 2, so I'd always wanted to be at SEAL Team 2. I say always, when I think back to some of the conversations I had and some of the things I watched about the military, I loved cold weather stuff.
Okay.
So SEAL Team 2 is known as the cold weather I think it was like the Northern Europe territory. So I was always just fascinated by that. And then when I actually became or got to buds and then you could start to pick, that's what I wanted to do. But the crazy thing that happened is because when I was in buds, 9/11 happened. And right after 9/11, they switched how all the SEAL teams worked. Used to be every SEAL team, and Terry talked about this too. Mm-hmm. SEAL Team 4 was the jungle warfare guys. They were. SEAL Team 2 is the Arctic guys. But they switched that right after 9/11. And it basically became the East Coast SEALs they split the world down the middle, like right in between Afghanistan and Iraq. And East Coast SEALs were in Iraq and to the east, and West Coast SEALs were like Afghanistan to the west. Huh. So I got to SEAL Team. Well, I selected SEAL Team 2. I got there, and it was all changed. And so I know. So because
I get to go to the desert.
I know, right? Of all things, I'm like, this is what I wanted to do. I got the actual team of all the teams I could go to. I got the team that I wanted. And then I'm going to the desert. So, but it was wartime. Of course, I would have chosen that if I wouldn't want to go to, Sweden and do that stuff if the war was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was a good thing. It was a good thing. But yeah, so so 9/11 happened when I was in buds. Got out of buds. Things. I mean, we were so young. You couldn't even really understand how much that was going to change our lives. But we got to the SEAL team after buds, and it was immediate game on, right? We all knew we were going to war. This is the first generation of people in, 30 years that were going to go to war. The last major war was Vietnam, and there's been some skirmishes since then, but major war was Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it was brand new to everybody. And so we got to the team, and it was game on. It was like another level that nobody had ever seen. So we were working a ton. Like we just almost spent no time at home. And that's because our leadership was like, hey, we got to go to war. Like we got to be prepared for this. So it was like, there was just no downtime. 18 months of a workup, close to 7 months of a deployment. My first deployment, did a bunch of different stuff, was in Missoula, did a lot of cool operations in Missoula right in the beginning of the war. Got there in April 2004. I think still to this day, it was the bloodiest, most deaths in a single month in Iraq history. It's crazy. 23 years old, and I'm at war. It's like I was just like a couple of years ago just playing high school basketball.
That's crazy, actually, to think.
It was a whirlwind, and you think back about it, like 5 years. The difference between 5 years nowadays, as you get older, is not a whole lot. But man, back then it was just it was like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
So yeah, get off the plane in Missoula for the first time and just bombs going off and more. I mean, it was like, whoa, we're here. Okay.
Threw us into it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So SEAL Team 2, did you spend any time in Afghanistan, or was it all?
It was almost all Iraq. Now, I was in Afghanistan, but we went there for a couple different reasons. None of it was to do any operations. Okay. There was I can't even remember, but I spent a little bit of time. It was just a few days in Afghanistan, but all my operating time was in Iraq.
Okay.
And I spent some time in other places too. I've been to Korea. I've been to Paraguay, Colombia. And then when we were in Iraq, we did a bunch of stuff around the Middle East. I was in Pakistan, all over that region. So
you trained the cold weather stuff, right? Did you know John Barklow?
No,
you didn't. No,
sorry. Say his name again.
John Barklow. He was in Alaska training like cold weather survival to the SEALs.
I don't know. I mean, because I did that. I went to Alaska. It's part of nowadays. It's part of what we call SQT.
Yeah. He's a little bit older than us. So I don't know if he would have been doing it then. He might have been still in, but he's super smart.
Yeah.
And did that for a long time.
Well, yeah. So we did the Alaska. Alaska's our one cold weather thing that everybody does. I'm trying to think how we go. It was a 3-week thing. Mm-hmm. It was actually, when I was in, it was still experimental. They had done it with a couple of classes, but it wasn't fully implemented. After I left, they had fully implemented it as a part of SQT. So that was a great trip. I don't remember the instructor's name. It's very likely he could have been one of the guys who was teaching me up there. I don't remember everybody's name up there.
Right.
But it was a blast. I mean, I tell you, that was one of the hardest 3 weeks of my life. I was telling you before we got on air that, I was listening to Terry's experience hiking up that mountain.
Right.
I think he was talking about in Afghanistan,
Yep.
up and down, and the treacherous terrain. And I'm like, that was Alaska. I was just thinking back to Alaska. It was raining. It was obviously, for us, it was just a training operation. It wasn't a real mission, but it was raining, and the steep cliffs. We were on Kodiak, so these steep mountains up and down, these huge, I don't know, creek beds or crevices in the
Right.
earth that you just had. Like, it was almost impossible to navigate your way through that terrain. And you were exhausted, and it was the middle of the night, and all the stuff that Terry was talking about. I'm like, man, I've been there for sure.
Wow, that's crazy.
I've
That's
been there.
crazy.
So
you go through SEAL team, you get out. Did you ever go, you know what? I'm just going to stay in.
oh sure.
What was the thing that pushed you and said, I think I'm going to go do something else? Go back to family business or whatever.
Well, I'm a pretty independent guy. I like my independence. I like my free time, and you don't have any of that in the military. I kind of knew that going in. I knew that about myself, but I knew I also wanted to do something really challenging. The push and pull for a SEAL team guy is that you've put all this time and effort into this discipline, into this, lifestyle, and to leave it, because you're, the cream of the crop, is a difficult decision, because like, I got to leave all this behind. I mean, I've trained for me, it was like 7 years. And, that was the longest I'd ever done anything at that point.
Yeah, and you're like, I don't know how this is going to transition into civilian life.
Right.
I mean, there's obviously some lessons and stuff, but the majority of the skill set you're not going to use again.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was lucky in a way that I knew my family had a business, and that was really another pull for me, because I felt obligated in some way. I mean, I don't want to say like it was my own personal obligation to be a third generation and at least give that a shot. I had a really great relationship with my grandfather, who started the McMillan businesses. And he had passed away right about the time I went into the Navy.
Oh, geez.
And I just really wanted to, I kind of wanted to make him proud. My dad and I have had a rough relationship over the years, but, he's still my dad, and I wanted to go try to give it a shot and work for him and see how it worked out. And, over time, I spent some time there. But anyway, I guess back to the point is that, that push and pull is tough. The other thing that I can say about getting out is they try to entice you with money. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Incentive bonuses, right? So you re-enlist for 4 or 5 or 6 years. And if it's 4, it's one amount. If it's 5, it's higher. It's 6, it's even higher.
Right.
So even if I had to re-enlist for 4 years, I was at 7 when I got out. That would have put me at 11. And they do it on purpose. I guarantee you. Once you hit over the hump, because 20 is your retirement, once you get to 10, nobody gets out. Very rarely do people get out. So they know,
I've done all the hard work.
Yeah, I'm on the downhill slide here.
Yeah.
And they're trying to pay you more money. I mean, bonuses get big after that, and so they try to keep you in as best they can.
Because because in the same sense, they've stuffed a ton of energy and time and training into you. You're an asset, and just to walk away with all that.
That is absolutely right. That's their motivation for sure.
Right.
They've done all this training on you. You have all this experience. For them to replicate that again with somebody else, and gain that experience, especially guys who have wartime experience.
Yeah.
They started paying people a lot of money to stay in. The other thing that was a factor of the amount of money they started paying us was, the defense contractors like Blackwater, Triple Canopy. Those guys were now showing up in Iraq and making a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would look at each other as SEAL team guys going, these guys are making like 5 times the amount of money we're making. And that was enticing.
And doing not as much crazy stuff as we are.
Yeah. Now they were hanging their butts out a little bit more than we were, because they didn't have the support we did.
Right.
So their job was a little bit, in a way, it could get hairy. They get trapped out in the middle of nowhere and in a firefight. No one's coming to save them.
Right.
But at the same time, we all were kind of like, man. And it was that transition where as Blackwater started to become a big thing, and they were paying people a ton of money, and basically the Defense Department, I'm guessing, is who was actually paying Blackwater to pay the people. Right. We're like, well, wait, man, why don't we get paid a little bit more? And so I think that they heard that cry, and what they did, instead of actually paying us more money, like as an E5 or an E6 or special pays, they're like, okay, we're going to incentivize their bonuses. So when they re-enlist, we're going to give them more money than we ever have. And so that's kind of how that worked. And they really started actually from the older guys. Like if you were at 19 years, man, your bonus was huge. Jeez. If you wanted to go in, I think it was like a 4-year re-enlistment at 19. If you wanted to re-enlist for 4 years, it was $150,000 or something. It was insane. Yeah. Probably those numbers aren't exactly right, but it's pretty close.
Close to it.
Yeah.
So you get out, and we talked about this before we got on. You got a physics degree. So that you had to have gone to college right after you got out.
Yeah.
In ASU, Arizona State. Why physics?
Well,
it just, I'm sorry, but it seems polar opposite to me, man.
Yeah. Well, it was a gradual thing. It was almost like the military. Like I knew I needed to do something, and then it just all kind of came to a head. After I got out of high school, I spent 2 years in college before I went into the military, and I was just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And it was just a community college, and I was taking some classes, and I had been successful in math. And when I say successful, I've gotten good grades, and
it came easy.
It came easy. That's a great way to put it. And so as I got into college, I'm like, well, what can I do with this skill I have? And I started taking more classes in that field, and then it was engineering, and then next thing you know, I was taking physics classes, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I really dug into like, what is physics all about? And I'm like, this is awesome. I was so fascinated by how the universe worked, all the little details about that, all the way down to like subatomic particles and quantum physics and the multiverse and how the universe was expanding. Everything you could think about, I just was in love with. The first 2 years of your physics degree is just like basic Newtonian stuff, I should say, like, blocks sliding down, angles. But then you get to your
here's
third.
All the rules.
Yeah, here's the basic stuff that we encounter on a daily basis. When you throw this baseball, what's the trajectory of the baseball? What's the velocity? Then once you get to your third year, you start doing some quantum physics, and everybody's just giddy because that's what you've been waiting for. Because quantum physics is it's like the stuff that nobody sees with their regular perception, but we know through experimentation is real. And it's like this world that exists that we can't see. It's so fast. It's almost like reading a sci-fi book or some fantasy book that you love, and it's not real, but actually it is. And that was the really cool part about it.
So for us laymen, what is quantum physics? What does that mean?
So quantum physics really is the physics discipline of understanding how the subatomic particle world works. Now, subatomic particles are like very small kind of atom-like structure. So an electron is a subatomic particle.
Okay.
Neutrons and protons, and there gets up to a certain weight that you then cross the threshold where you start to the particle starts to operate under what we call like Newtonian physics and not quantum physics. So Newtonian physics is simple. When I say simple, but it's understandable. It's like you throw a baseball, and the baseball, we know we can predict how, based upon the velocity that you throw it at and the angle that you throw it at, we can predict where it's going to land. That's stuff that's like we see that, we can feel it, we know it,
right.
We can observe it. But
even a layman like me understands that there's things going on when you throw a baseball.
Right. Yeah. But on quantum physics, things don't operate that way. They operate in a totally different way, which is a wild concept. They operate totally different. So subatomic particles do not act that way. As a matter of fact, there's all kinds of unique principles about them. You've probably heard of quantum entanglement. Yeah. It's a fascinating topic where I'm trying to think about how to say this without boring people, but it's the concept of where if anybody's heard of, the speed of light, this is the one thing that in kind of theory could break that framework, because you have two particles that could be spread across the entire universe and they act upon each other instantaneously. And there's something about that interaction that nobody understands. We can experiment on it. We know the physics behind it. We have no idea why that happens.
So when you say experiment on it, you can see things, you can see that it works, but you have no idea how it works.
Right. Exactly.
That is absolutely fascinating.
It's insane. And that's just one of many, many things that we can measure, but we don't understand about quantum physics.
Wow.
And what it really does is it opens up the possibility of all kinds of crazy stuff, because as quantum physics is how subatomic particles work on a daily basis. You and I have subatomic particles in us, and that's how it works. But we as an individual, we operate in the Newtonian world. Like if I jump, that's a Newtonian thing. Like I know where I'm going to land, right? So, but what it does is it opens up all kinds of weird thought process about like, what is our consciousness? Like, is consciousness something? Do we have a soul? Like, how does quantum physics play in these types of things? Because through standard physics, nobody can really there's no explanation. And because quantum physics, we don't even really know the source of it. It just opens up this world of this wild fascination that it's not necessarily fantasy. It's potentially true, but you know what I mean? It's not like we know it's not fantasy, but there's some truth in there, but we just don't know what it is.
Jeez. You just blew my mind. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
I had no idea that exists. No wonder people are writing articles on you about your being the physics guy. You're the physics SEAL team.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, we're going to down that too far, but
yeah.
So you get a physics degree at ASU and you go back to the family business?
I do. Yeah. Well, I kind of did the degree while I was doing the business.
Okay.
I was in this mode where, after I got out of the military, I just wanted to do all this stuff. Like I had stuff I needed to do. So I had a family. I had 4 kids. I was running the business and I was getting my degree at the same time. And I looked everywhere for like an online degree or something, but they don't do any, all physics has to be done basically in person, at least when I graduated in 2014. So, and only major universities offer it. Like most like smaller universities don't even offer physics. It's such a small program. I think in my class in Arizona State, which by the way, one of the largest universities in the country.
Yeah.
I think we had, I want to say 14, but I think it may have been 20 in the low 20s graduate of a school that had like 80,000 students.
Yeah. They're pushing 100,000 students.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So like it was like 20. I want to say just so I'm not like underdoing it, overdoing it, like 20 would be I would be a safe number of how many people graduated with me.
Wow. Okay. So you go to school. Let's back up a little bit and let's talk about the family business. We've touched on it. I think people are going to read the title of this and go, really, McMillan stock. Okay. So let's go back to Grandpa, and he started building stocks, and let's explain why and then the progression of the business.
Yeah.
Now that we know, where you ended or where you guys met or came back together, let's talk about that.
Okay. So my grandfather, he grew up hunting. I shouldn't say hunting. He grew up shooting. That's a better way to put it. He grew up shooting in the desert of Arizona when nobody lived in Arizona. Like it was in the middle of the desert.
What time frame? What years?
He was born in 1930.
Okay.
So he grew up in the 30s and 40s. And so he was shooting, and that was the thing they did for fun back then. He joined the Air Force, I think right away, right when he was 18, and he was a flight crew guy. Spent 20 years doing that. But he always shot. He was always a shooter, even in his military days. Didn't shoot in the military or for the Air Force or anything, but that was a job. But he continued to shoot. He got out. He got a job for Motorola back in Phoenix. He'd moved all over in the Air Force. Got a job in Phoenix. Came back home, and they were experimenting on this new process, this hand laid up fiberglass that it wasn't really a thing back then in the late 60s, mid to late 60s. And so he saw Motorola working on this process, and he's like, man, you know what? I think I could use this process to make a fiberglass stock.
What were they building? Towers?
I can't remember.
Antennas or something?
I don't know if I ever got that information from my family. I bet my uncle knows.
I'm going to have to GTS that. Google that stuff.
But they were working on whatever they were working on back then. He adopted that concept to start making stocks. And so, because back then it was only really wood from what I can remember. Right. I don't even think plastic was a thing back then. And so, there were issues with wood. Wood can warp, under certain environmental conditions, whether it's precipitation or whether it's heat or cold, it can warp, and it can do, and it's not that it's weak, but fiberglass can be stronger. Let's just put it that way. So he saw this and was like, man, I think I can make a stock. So anyway, he spent 5 years from 1968 to 1973 making designing molds, making stocks to try to launch his first product into the market. And I remember pictures and my dad telling me about it, but just my grandfather and my grandma was kind of part of it too, but they would have these molds on the dining room table and epoxy was everywhere. And they were, back then everybody smoked. So just, you could just imagine
oh my gosh,
epoxy and chemicals and smoke.
In this like laboratory, AKA the front kitchen.
AKA the kitchen.
Oh
yeah. So, and it's funny because I've been around the business for so long. Like you have these areas in which you do some of your work and this resin kind of just piles up over time because it just, maybe it leaks out in your molds here.
Drops here.
And I could just imagine these piles of hardened resin on their dining room table as they're trying to eat dinner or something. So it's a cool memory. I wasn't alive back then. It's just kind of secondhand information, but that's what I was told. Anyway, he started the business in 1973 and he didn't really think much of it other than like he really wanted to build some stocks for his competition shooting. That's what he loved to do. And in around 1975, after Vietnam was kind of coming to a close, what the Marines and the Army and everybody knew is they needed a sniper weapon. I don't even know if they called it sniper back then. I don't know when the term came about, but they needed a more accurate militarized single shot weapon, right? More precision firearm. Because if you remember, even Carlos Hathcock in the days of the Mod Deuce shooting guys like 2,000 yards with a Mod Deuce, like that was what they had. And even their, they have M14s and they had almost like hunting stuff. It was not what we know today. Mm-hmm. So my grandfather started building stocks, and then the Marine Corps somehow, and I don't know exactly how, but they got connected. And the Marine Corps was like, hey man, what you're doing is we could really use this. And so not only did they start using the stock, but they also used him as an expert because he had been doing competition stuff and shooting and building guns, stocks, all kinds of components his whole life. Like he was kind of the expert in what was.
He was the first Brian at Hat Creek. This is the first guy to actually take that skill set that he built or learned from shooting competition and bring it into the military.
Yeah. And my grandfather, I don't think he ever really anticipated that, but he was building the most accurate gun he could. And the military saw that and go, well, let's put a military spin on that, but let's keep all the accuracy. And that's what happened. And so they contracted him to do that. The M40A1 was born. They call it the modern sniper rifle, the birth of the modern sniper rifle when they launched the M40A1. And my grandfather had a lot to do with that. And that was really cool. It's a really cool part of my history. And I want to always keep that alive because that's a great thing for the family.
Hey there, fellow hunters and shooting enthusiasts. Are you tired of ear-ringing shots and the fear of permanently damaging your hearing? Nobody wants to be that old guy. Look no further than Silencer Central. These top-of-the-line silencers not only protect your hearing, but also allow for that second shot if needed. The target's not even spooked by the crack of the rifle. They also provide a ship-in barrel threading service, making the process easy and precise. Speaking of easy, don't let the paperwork process from the ATF deter you. Silencer Central makes it easy. They will walk you through the online forms over the phone. Upgrade your hunting game and protect your hearing with Silencer Central. So has anyone ever done and this is probably coming because I can see somebody like Black Rifle's team or Fieldcraft's team doing this. Has anyone ever done a story on this?
Not
like a documentary?
No, not that I know of. I mean, and the funny thing is, I don't have a whole lot of even pictures of my grandfather. Him and I were close, but back then we didn't have cell phones, nothing.
Yeah, nobody took photos.
Very few photos. Sometimes I try to look him up online to see. He died in 2000, so it was really before the big boom of the internet and phones. So there's really just not even a lot online. The only stuff you can find online is like the stuff that McMillan has put out as like kind of a legacy or like, about us page. There's almost nothing about him.
Wow.
And it's crazy. I think to myself, like, man, he had a lot of influence in modern day sniper rifles and sniping in general. And most people don't even really know who he is. And, I have all these great stories about him. And, but that's really, as I do more podcasts and I talk about him, that's really some of the only content out there about him. It almost sometimes I'm like, man, I can't believe that he had this great, he wasn't just a guy who helped the Marine Corps, but he had all these businesses. He was one of the first guys to invent night vision in a scope so that actually you could shoot a scope with night vision He had a company. He was an entrepreneur. He had a company who did that. He had a scope company. He had a gun company.
You're kidding me.
He had all kinds of stuff. He had all kinds of really cool stuff in the gun industry. And when he died, it all kind of just went away. And
so your dad took the stock company, right?
Yeah.
Is he still involved?
My dad passed away about 2 years ago now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was pretty sudden. My dad was a pretty healthy guy, and it was a pretty sudden thing. But my dad actually had sold the company 6 months before that.
Oh, okay.
When I left to do my thing, I think that left him in a position where as he was getting older, he wanted to figure out whether he wanted how long was I going to do this for, and so he decided to sell it, and so that sold to Bob Beck, who is Extreme Outer Limits guy, who's also recently, I think, bought Defiance, and he has got a couple other companies. I think he had a media company and then a firearms company, which is EOL. And so he bought that in, I think it was December 31st of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you say you left to do your own thing. What is your own thing?
Oh, so Greyboe is my own thing. It's a rifle stock company. As I was at McMillan for a long period of time, I just watched, I just observed, and I was doing all kinds of other stuff too, but I just observed, and I just thought, man, I felt like we could make stocks in a much more efficient way. I didn't really, I would say really was naive a little bit back then, because if I would have known then what I know now, it's been a really hard road. It's turned out to be great, but man, if I would have known how much work it would have been, it's kind of the same with buds. Like you want to be a SEAL, you don't really know how hard buds is. Yeah. You just do it.
And no one can tell you because your experience it's like having a kid. There's no way to explain that.
There's no way to explain it. And so anyway, I just was like, I saw it, my dad he's kind of at the end of his career as I was making these decisions. And I didn't know how close to the end of his career he was, but I just knew that like he's getting old. He's in his early to mid 60s. And he just wasn't interested in doing, this would have been taken a lot of money, took me a lot of money, took a lot of time to get to where I am today. And he probably could anticipate that. I just don't think he had the stomach for it. And, he had done well financially in his life. So I don't think he wanted to rock that boat. So it's totally cool. No worries. But I was chomping at the bit to do something exciting. I was like, I need to do something. And so I ended up starting my own business, and I did it in a way that I wanted to really streamline the process, make super high quality carbon fiberglass rifle stocks, but do it in a way that was scalable. And that was the big problem for McMillan. And I see that with other companies too, who have similar products. It's a hard company to scale because there's so much labor involved in that hand laid up process. And so, I watched my dad. I think the big thing for me is that when I was young and eager, I still am, but I knew he couldn't do anymore. I knew it was like he had topped out his limit, and to go beyond that was going to take a lot of capital and a lot of extra effort and time that he didn't want to put in. So it was like, starting my career, I wanted to be able to move on beyond that and to do things that, traditional stock makers couldn't do. And I saw that vision, and that's kind of what drove me to open Greyboe and to kind of go where I'm at today.
So Greyboe, let's talk about that for the guys that don't know, which I personally think you're extremely innovative, but let's talk about Greyboe. What makes it different than any of the other stocks? What makes it different than some of these rifle manufacturers are now making their own stocks that used to use McMillan and stuff.
Right.
So what's different?
Well, it starts with that process I was telling you about. It's really finding a new way to make a stock with the same and even better quality in a lot of ways. So, to the customer, what makes us, internally, what makes us different than McMillan is our processes, right? And how we do things and how we can scale and how we can actually go to, let's say, into distribution and have the margins for distribution to be able to reach more people. Internally, that's kind of the difference, where McMillan really just didn't, the process was so labor intensive that they just didn't have the margins. They couldn't make enough to do distribution. And so it was like, okay, they had a top out level. From a customer standpoint, we're definitely different in the way the products look, and we can design And our products look differently because of the way we make them. I don't want to get into the details because we'll get way off track here, but the way that we manufacture our parts, our stocks, allows us to have all these different unique shapes. And so we can actually create all kinds of unique, cool geometries that you wouldn't get in a traditional hand laid up stock. We have much more control over the weight of the product because we can design it in a geometric way that it's lighter and stronger in certain areas. And one of the big differences too is that we have a much more sophisticated engineering team. We do everything in CAD, SolidWorks. We design all of our product. It's all done. And then we have 2D drawings. We measure it. We make our own molds. We have CNC machines to make our own molds. So over the years, I've realized I don't really like relying on other people. And it's been a hard lesson to learn in both ways. If you rely on yourself and you're vertically integrated, it's very expensive, especially in manufacturing. So it's a very expensive endeavor, and it's easy to make a lot of mistakes when you're kind of charting new territories, which we've done. The process that we have is so unique to us that we make our own equipment. It's insane.
Oh, wow.
Everything we do is unique. There's not a single piece of equipment that we use that's designed
for something else that you can use.
It's either designed for, we've adopted it because it's been designed for something else, or we make it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's been in a lot of ways a tough road, but that's what I love about it too. It's a challenge. Every single day is a challenge. It's something new. And sometimes that can bite you, and other times, but
it causes I call it the flat forehead syndrome. There's a lot of beating your head against a wall to make something. You're like, I know we can do this. Let's figure out how.
Yeah.
Lots of molds and lots of broken glass. So who would you say your primary customer is? Are you selling to manufacturers, or are you selling, to Jim Bob that's building his own custom gun? Or are you selling, who's the guy that you're targeting?
Well, it's all of the above. Our target is the end user, of course, the guy who's going out and mostly hunting right now. We're going to get more into competition stuff, but most of our stocks are hunting stocks. But it is, in a way, our customers are all of the above. Like, we do OEM deals with big rifle customers. So like Winchester and Springfield and Remington, back when they were there, we had the stock for their AWR and a number of others. So that's one. We have a distribution network. We just signed up this year a sales rep group to go pitch our stuff to larger distribution and dealers throughout the United States. We're starting to gain an international presence. So we have maybe 4 or 5 international distribution places. And then we have an online store too. So we sell directly to the consumer. So people who want to come to the website, like buying directly from us, they can do that. So it's all of the above. And what I've learned about business is you have to have multiple ways of making revenue. Yeah. If you have just one, you will be screwed. All it takes is one time for you to
screw something up.
Yeah,
I call it the 4 revenue streams. Is above that is where you start to become successful, because below that, you're right, one of them will take you out.
Yes,
completely.
Yeah, and the more you have, the more diverse you are. So if one of them goes away, you still have the other 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, right, and you can keep moving forward. Yeah. In the beginning, though, it's really scary because you have one. Our first big thing we did was we had the Remington contract with the AWR. And that was all we had the first year. And we were struggling to try to get some dealers involved, and we didn't even have a website that you could buy a product on yet. So it was like, if we screw this up, we put all this money into it, we're screwed. Luckily, we just got involved with enough dealers by the time Remington went out of business, went bankrupt, to keep ourselves afloat that next year. And then it kind of forced us to build that dealer network. And then other OEMs kind of just started jumping on board and then started piling on. And then in 2000, I think it was 20, we really went hard after our online store. So that really has been successful. So now we have a number of different streams of revenue that we can call them levers that we can pull just in case, one of them gets tapped out.
So what's the future? Do you have some crazy plans on completely re-engineering the way that rifle stocks are held or used?
Well, I would say maybe to the end user, it may not look revolutionary to them. I think they'll see it and go, man, that's some pretty cool stuff. But to us internally and the way stocks are made and have always been made, I think what we're doing is revolutionary for sure. So what I mean by that is one of the reasons why traditional composite stocks have never been able to, be sold at volume is because they're super complex.
Yeah.
Right. So you have this rifle and you need to know all this information about an aftermarket stock. And so it makes the customer feel dumb. It's a really hard transaction to do between the customer and the sales rep. There's so many little nuances. How many different barrels are there out there? There's a million.
Yeah.
And so what we've tried to do is in a way emulate what chassis companies did without probably knowing it. But, they don't have a barrel channel. They just have a big gaping hole. And their action area top line is low enough so that you don't have to deal with any of the ports, right? So we've actually started to implement that into our stock. So all of our stocks going forward have that. And then the last thing that's kind of a pain is DBMs, bottom metals. It's a confusion point for the customer. And so the traditional stock makers, they can't build in a DBM like a chassis company can. So if you think about it, a chassis, you don't need a bottom metal. You snap the magazine right in there. And so we're actually going to be moving in that direction from a composite standpoint, which no other, fiberglass or carbon fiber stock company has done that, nor do I think they can with their process. So yeah, that I think to me, so what you're going to see is like this, you have chassis stocks, you have these composite stocks. And so what we're doing is we're really bringing those much closer together. I'm 100% convinced that fiberglass and carbon fiber is the superior material for rifle stocks. The reason why chassis get as much oomph as they have is because you can put all kinds of really great bells and whistles on them, where composite stocks you can't. Chassis are easy to buy, composite stocks are hard to buy. Well, we looked at that and said we've got to get closer to the simplicity of a chassis stock, and also being able to hang anything off that rifle or that stock that you want to. And so we're getting really close to that. So this year, within the next couple months, we'll be launching a stock that'll have that integrated bottom metal in it. And there will be almost no difference between that stock and a chassis other than the material and maybe some design features and stuff. But other than that.
So can you call, so obviously my audience is, some of them are real custom guys, but most of them are just Joe Finicniks like me that, I kind of understand what you're talking about, but I wouldn't even know where to start. Do you have manufacturers that you're like, okay, I want, this stock and this action and this, whatever? Is there clients that you do that with?
So be more specific about that.
So like, can I call up Christensen Arms, say, hey, I want a Greyboe stock, and here's what I want, this new one, blah blah blah. Do you have manufacturers, or is it better get online, order it, and then just start rector setting it?
Yeah, so both, either or, right? So like we sell stock, let's say for instance to Winchester right now on their XPR. You can go to Winchester and buy one of their XPR models and it'll have a Greyboe stock on it. It'll say Greyboe on there too. So when you look at the description, it'll say it's a Greyboe stock. And everybody that we work with, Springfield, we just launched a Redline. Their Redline rifle has our stock on it. And so you can do that. And we like to do that because it gives the customer the opportunity to buy that product at the lowest possible price rather than buying a product and having to add something to it. So we feel like we're still giving the customer a ton of value that way, because that's our goal. It's just to bring a ton of value to as much value to the customer as we can. That's how I think we win in the end. But I think that's one way to do it, is like if the guy wants a Greyboe stock and he knows he's looking for a rifle, he can basically go to one of the companies that we deal with and he can buy that rifle and it's already got a Greyboe stock on there. It's going to be the same stock too that we sell on our website. So like the Redline, for instance, the Springfield Redline, that's a Trekker. So if you go on our website, you see the Trekker, it's the same stock. Okay. And so, yeah, so that's it's huge value for the customer if we do it that way. Or, they go deal with a company that we don't deal with, or they go buy a rifle from a company. Who don't we deal with?
Do you deal with Savage?
We do.
Okay.
But we haven't launched anything yet, but we're dealing with them right now. I probably shouldn't be saying much about that, but yeah,
they're one of my sponsors. The other reason I asked.
Yeah. So we just made a stock. We launched a Savage aftermarket stock in December.
Okay.
And so in process with that, we've been working with them on a project too. So hoping to launch that very soon. But yeah, anyway, if you go to a company that doesn't have a stock on it, Ruger, it's a good example. you can buy a stock from us aftermarket, and that may be the only way to get your hands on a stock if that particular manufacturer doesn't use us.
Okay. So you talk about hunting. We have not touched hunting at all, but you're making hunting stocks.
Yeah.
So let's talk about hunting.
Okay.
Are you hunting?
I've hunted a number of times in my life. I don't know if I'd call myself a hunter.
Not a passionate hunter. It's
right.
Not what you wake
I
up
love
and
doing it. I love hunting. Every time I go, I'm like, man, I got to do this more. I've hunted elk. I've hunted antelope. I think I'm so focused on my business, and I hate to say that but anyway, and our business is hunting, so it's so busy during hunting season. Yeah. And I always find an excuse for some reason, because I always have opportunities. People are like, hey, why don't you come out with me? I have a private land tag or whatever.
Right.
And so sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but oftentimes I'll find an excuse like, man, we're slammed right now. I can't take a week or two off. And some of my employees will go, and it's hard because, we're busy. And we've worked for 10 years or so at this thing. And I want to make sure it still just keeps moving forward, and every day matters. So anyway, back to the hunting thing. I have hunted a number of times, but I wouldn't call myself like a hunter, every, on a regular basis.
So, one of the, obviously all the guests that I have on the Red Thread is hunting community.
Yep.
And we talk very little about hunting on this. We talk about, who you are, where you started, whatever you're doing, your Greyboe stocks. There's 3 questions, and I don't know if you were prepared for this, because I asked you earlier. I said, you listen to any of my podcasts? You said yes. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell him. It's a little bit off the cuff. I apologize. There's 3 questions that I ask everybody. Number 1 is, if you were asked or had the opportunity to do a TED Talk, do you know what a TED Talk is?
Yeah.
What would you do your TED Talk on? I know, and it's one of those go, oh, I don't know.
I am really passionate about our freedom. Now, that sounds super vague, right? But anything that's kind of a modern thing, or even history. I love reading history. I love, reading how, in a way, how oppressive regimes in the past have fallen apart. I love that stuff. I've read a lot about the old communist Russia.
Really?
Yeah. And how that relates to what we do now, and how our country is going. And I wouldn't call it politics. I don't really love that term, but I really have this passion about trying to make sure our country stays on the right path, because I'm a patriot. I have a real concern for that. I have some unique experiences with my SEAL team experience, my physics degree, so I'd probably have to tie that in. But really what I'm super interested in right now and going forward, probably spending the rest of my life outside of Greyboe, would be talking about how we can keep our country going on the right path. And I think right now is such an important time, because we're on the wrong path. I don't think there's
100%.
Many people who
100%.
would say differently. And there's so many things. I think COVID and the lockdowns was so detrimental to our country. And it showed the hand, I think, of the government and whoever is behind all of those lockdowns and all those draconian measures. So I'm really passionate about that. I really like to listen to scholarly people too. So I'm getting a little off topic here, but no. I really like listening to former professors, let's say, who have the same interest in this. Jordan Peterson's one of them. Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein are some of them, and just a number of people who really have this great wisdom, but also great knowledge, and are using that to try to better our country. So
you bring up Russian history. Did you listen to Putin's conversation? Did you?
I sure did. Yeah.
So I haven't heard it, and partially because of this show and getting prepared for it and all the stuff, I haven't heard it. Partially because I didn't want to be distracted, because I think it's going to be one of those interviews that people go for generations.
Yeah.
They're going to say, this is why he says it here.
Yeah.
So, to my understanding, the first 30 minutes of it, he gives a history. In your studies on the Russian history, is it pretty accurate?
Well, he goes all the way back to like the 1600s. I haven't studied that far. And the other thing that was really interesting, he mentioned that some would think what Stalin did was an atrocity, but he very, very vaguely touched on that at all. So that period between 1917 when the Bolshevik Revolution started and basically I think it was like 1986 or 87 when the wall fell, he didn't talk about that at all, really, because that's a really black eye.
And that's what you studied.
That's what I'm super interested in. He started way farther back than that in the 1600s and how the land was, Russian and how, Ukraine wasn't even really a thing. And, he got into the details of that and how it was kind of given to them, but it really wasn't theirs. It shouldn't have been given to them. And the details of why, I wouldn't say the details, but some information on why Russia has interest in taking that land back.
Why he thinks they deserve to have it back.
Yes. It's almost like it's always been theirs. It never should have been Ukraine's. Ukraine is not I don't remember if he said, I don't know if they have their own language or not, but they just don't, they don't have a history to them. They are Russian. He said they're Russian and Polish, to be honest. He said there's, a lot of Ukraine is Polish. And so, I don't, strategically didn't really get into it. And you're right. The first half an hour, as a matter of fact, I thought it was more than a half hour. I thought it was at least the first hour. He just continued to go on. The way he spoke, I don't know. I know you haven't listened to it yet, but it was really fascinating because us in America, and even in the Western world, we deal with conversations and interviews in a certain way. It's a quick back and forth. He just went off for like a half an hour, and Tucker would ask him a question and he would just be like, I'll get to that in a minute. Let me finish. And so Tucker made a comment afterwards and he's like, you could tell this guy is not used to actually answering questions from people.
So he's not an American politician where he has to answer the question.
He has to answer questions, right? So it was I thought it was a great insight to how, those people are. I think if nothing else, even if he's lying through his teeth, and I don't know, you never know.
Right.
But it was a really interesting insight to the way they think versus how we think. We don't think the same way. As Americans, we think everybody thinks the way we do, and they don't. And so, I listened to some of the people on the, let's just call it the left, and how they say Tucker's a puppet for Putin. It's like, come on. Like, don't you want to hear him talk? Like, I've never heard Putin talk more than just a little,
Yeah. Like
I didn't even realize he didn't even know English. I figured most world leaders know English. They come together on these big summits, but he spoke in Russian and it was a translator. And it was just fascinating to listen to him talk and how different we all are. And, I was thinking about this afterwards too. I'm like, whether it's in a relationship or anything, there's always two sides to a story. Always. If let's say someone gets a divorce, there's always two competing personalities there that have their own interests in mind. And I'm not saying Russia's right or not. I'm saying, I don't know. I'll be honest, but you've got to listen to the other side to really get a good understanding of what's really going on. I don't think most Americans have a clue about what the history is of Russia and Ukraine and why Russia and why Putin thinks that it's theirs. They should know that before they start making these, decisions and judgments. They should at least listen to the guy.
I also agree. You said something really interesting that I think a lot of Americans don't know. I think a lot of Americans don't travel enough and understand that America is actually unique in the way that we think, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we do almost everything. We're unique in the world. There's a lot of countries. You go to Asia and there's a lot of things that they do very similar. They think very similar. They act very similar. They eat very similar. America is unique, and we have a tendency, because we're very selfish and because of those uniquenesses, we have a tendency to think the world's that way. And what you said with Russia is 100% right. They think differently, and that's what makes this situation unique.
It was like when Trump went to North Korea.
Yes.
We know he's a bad, Kim Jong-un is a bad dude. we know, is it Un or Il? I don't, Kim
Yeah.
Jong-un, right? Is the son.
Yeah.
We know he's not a good guy. We know he murders his own people. But to go kind of get in his head for a day, that's probably a pretty good idea.
Reagan did that with Gorbachev. He got in his head, and figured out, what happened in Reykjavik, Iceland. What is going on there?
Yeah.
What is going on? And completely understood what was going on, and that's how that in 1989 or whatever it was, the wall came down,
Right?
Because he understood the opponent, so
right?
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think we're just really naive if you think that just talking to someone is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, just talking to Putin doesn't mean anything other than he's going to deliver information to us that might help us understand him and even potentially stop this war. I mean, if you think what Tucker Carlson did and asking him some of the questions that he did about why are you here? What are you doing? If there was an opportunity to make peace, would you do it? Those are questions I highly doubt our president even asked. And Tucker asked him that, and Putin said, no, nobody's asked me. And so whether Putin's lying or not, we don't know, again, but it seems to me that some of the information that I've heard, it's like Putin didn't really want to go to war. I mean, you say that with some grain of salt here.
He wanted to go to war, but he did want it.
But there was a buildup over time that he basically said there's a buildup over time. Like, in the Clinton era, Russia wanted to get into NATO. And the whole goal of the Cold War was to separate and to try to keep us safe from Russia. And you would think that, like, once that happened, once Russia had this interest in joining NATO, you'd think that that's over. Okay, we won. Like, we're friends. We're friends now. But they rejected them. And so that was kind of the first of the snowballs that happened. And over time, like, again, I'm not saying that what he did was right or not, but you got to understand a guy's motivation. And you got to understand, like, hey, is there an opportunity for us to salvage what's already all the destruction? Like, can we go over there and make peace?
Right.
And I think, from what he says, if you take what he says as truth, there is opportunity to end this tomorrow. I don't know what that is, and I'm not in the negotiation, so I'm not going to pretend. But it sounds to me like it's not just like Putin's this warmonger and he's going to stop at nothing. It's like, well, let's try to work this thing out, because I think they said the last estimate was 400,000 Ukrainian men are dead. Yeah. The average soldier over there is 45 years old now. They're just decimating their male population.
It's really interesting. I think it was done very well on Tucker's part and on his part. The optic of it. As Americans, we've looked at Putin as this scary, scary individual, right? He's riding a bear, that guy. We humanized him, number one. Number two, we get to see where he's coming from, which then helps us understand where we should be going. And you're right. It was really, really, really well done.
Yes.
So,
yep.
So that would have been an interesting TED Talk.
Yeah. Well,
I think we spent more than 4 minutes on that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm just teasing. So you talked a little bit about your family. What are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed? I mean, we've hit some pretty thick topics here in a very short amount of time. What are you going to be thinking?
Well, my kids, my wife, for sure. Like, I know that's the standard answer, but the great thing about life is that, as you start to have kids, you just understand why that has been something that's been so important to people forever, like ever. And it's, you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we're built and designed to reproduce and to push our DNA forward. But, our kids are really the only thing that this is what I really feel like. They're the only thing that we really have that we can hold on to. That's ours. Like, my business could be gone tomorrow. My house could be gone tomorrow. The government can take it all, but my kids are my kids. And that's the best opportunity I have to live forever, is to pass that on to those young people. And, you spend all this time with them. They're like little mini me's, and you just love them. You love them to death. And I heard someone say somewhere, like, if you're a competitive person, the only person you ever want to beat you is your kids, like, to be better than you truly. And that's the truth.
That's really insightful.
Yeah. And I see that with my kids, my boys, especially because they're boys, competitive. But I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and I just, and it's such a unique age. My daughter's 18; she's going to go to college next year, and I'm
looking forward to that.
And we're super close. My oldest daughter, and I are super close, and so she's going to go off to a different state most likely, and so that's going to be. I'm so excited for her because she's becoming such a great young woman, but I'm also sad. It's like, and then I got 3 more after that are just going to march their way off into the world. And so hopefully I did my job, but I just hope that I think the measure of myself and the measure of anybody is just how your kids think of you, and how I think nothing more than on my deathbed than my kids to go, Dad, you did a good job. Yeah. I think that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Dad, you did a good job. I'm going to miss you. That's what I want.
I think you're right 100%. It's our true legacy. It's really the only thing we get to leave here that will be passed down for generations. And in 20 generations, they may not be talking about me, but they'll be talking about stuff that I've instilled in the kids that had kids that had kids. That's the stuff that's passed down.
Right. Yeah.
Not just my balding head.
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate the time, man. I know that we're at Hunt Expo here in Salt Lake, and there's a lot to look at. And you just got here, so you really haven't even got to scratch the surface of what's if you're a Western hunter or involved in Western hunting, you got to see this show. It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you taking the time up front to do this.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to check some of your stuff out. You guys don't have a booth here, but hopefully next year.
Yeah. Hopefully next year. I just heard about it. I mean, I know it's been around for a while, but it's becoming really a big deal. And so everybody that I kind of in my circle is like, hey, dude, you got to go to Western Hunting Expo. And I'm like, okay, let me go check it out. Well, we actually tried to get a booth, but by the time we had heard about it, all the booths were done.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go walk it. I'm going to go see. And then, so hopefully we can get a booth next year.
Yeah.
But this place, Dallas Safari Club, and a couple others are really
Did you go to SCI in Nashville?
I did not. No.
So I heard I didn't either because I was at Dallas and Sheep Show, but I heard it was unbelievable.
Well, that's great because that just means our industry just keeps growing. And that's great for all of us.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for the time.
Not a problem. Thank you. I
appreciate it.